Recorded my vile stepdad's Ab-ses on hidden cameras, after years of torture, and now the law finally believes in my truth. I am a 27-year-old man, and I survived intrafamilial child torture at the hands of my stepdad and my mother while growing up. My mom didn't have the best example of motherhood herself, her own mom was far from nurturing, so perhaps she was doomed from the start. But my family's darkness runs much deeper than bad parenting. There's a long generational line of abusers and inappropriate family behavior, so you can begin to imagine how twisted everything was behind closed doors. When my mom had me, she started making a string of terrible decisions, especially when it came to men. She chose partners with anger issues, abusive men who saw authority as cruelty. But one man stands out. He became my stepdad, and he was, without doubt, the worst of the worst. It all began when I was just 6 years old. I still remember the day a random, bulky built, impossibly tall man with dark hair moved into our house. Without any warning, he drilled it into my head that he was my new stepdad, that my real dad didn't love me, but he did. I'll call him Jay. I'd never seen this man before in my life, but from that very first encounter, he already started building narratives, trying to claim ownership of my life before even attempting a bond. Honestly, I don't even have a memory of being introduced to him. Suddenly, he was just there. Control. That was his sole obsession, and once he entered my life, he turned me into his puppet. Jay and my mom wielded my autism as their excuse for everything. Whenever I had a meltdown, or became overstimulated, which was entirely understandable, they punished and belittled me for it. The justification always circled back to my being on the spectrum, as if that could possibly legitimize their. Soon after Jay moved in, I was introduced to his niece, who was 11 at the time while I was just 6. That's when I first encountered inappropriate behavior from her, far from age appropriate. She showed me, and I followed without understanding how wrong it was. It was then that Jay's most sinister plan began to unfold. The camera in my room was the beginning of it all. Jay convinced my mom that I was somehow a danger to both myself and society, and because of that, I had to be closely monitored, under surveillance 24/7. They packed up all my toys, took away my bed frame, and left only a mattress on the floor. A little gray square box camera with a thick black cord was set up in my room, the cord snaking along the wall, leading to the living room where Jay kept a small TV to monitor me. That camera stayed with me for years, until the day I finally escaped. I was extremely neglected. No one ever taught me to tie my shoes, brush my hair, or take care of my teeth or body, but I knew how to clean. A spotless house was expected from me by the time I was 8. Hugs? I don't remember receiving them from my mother. She never told me she loved me. Instead, she was always irritable, ready to snap at the smallest thing. The lack of any affection made me desperate for kindness. When I was in preschool, I literally faked an injury just so the nice office lady would give me attention, patch me up, and talk to me with care. Looking back, I see how deeply sad and embarrassing that was, but it was just the product of a completely unloved child, desperate to be nurtured. Neither my mom nor Jay ever lifted a finger around the house or yard. That's what I was there for, every single day. If I complained, got a bad grade, asked for privacy, or wanted even a sliver of my own will, Jay would punish me. There was never any clear reason for the beatings. I was hit almost daily. Jay's anger was intense and always directed at me. Sometimes he used objects, but mostly he used his hand, spanking me until I could barely sit down. He'd force me to write self-deprecating sentences by the hundreds. I was isolated and forbidden from seeing or having friends over, or going to their homes. So I grew up completely unaware of how other kids' parents behaved. Jay tightly controlled everything. The movies I watched, the music I listened to, my clothes, the way I spoke, who my friends were at school. He'd even befriend other parents, putting on a show that he was an outstanding man who had nobly taken in a child as his own. He did all he could to terrify me. He'd show me episodes of Beyond Scared Straight, then threaten to send me to a place like that to fix me. Sometimes, he fake called the police while making me sit at the kitchen table with him, both of us listening for sirens. He'd watch me sob and have panic attacks, that look of sick satisfaction never leaving his face. He loved to belittle me, his favorite insult being the R word. I remember my 11th birthday so vividly. I got a hamster, and I instantly adored that little creature. He was with me for 2 years, and I saw him as my baby. One afternoon, I came home from school to find the hamster's body lying lifeless in its cage, placed right on the kitchen table. Jay was there, waiting for me. I'll never forget the way he grinned at me as I broke down in tears. As I sobbed uncontrollably, he told me that it was my fault, and this was meant to teach me a lesson. By court order, my biological dad had custody of me every other weekend. But Jay would sometimes lie and say I was at a friend's house to keep me from him. When I managed to go, the idea of abuse at home faded. I was filled with excitement, just to be around my dad. Dad barely noticed me, to be honest. Most of the time he just drank and played Counter-Strike, ignoring me. Still, Jay's words began to echo in my head. Maybe my dad really didn't love me. I always thought of my dad as my potential savior, the one who would finally take me away from Jay, at least on the weekends. I even told my dad a few things about what was happening at home, but he didn't believe me. His reply? You need someone like him. You just don't like that he's strict. That crushed me. Ever since I was 8, I'd been depressed. After that, depression became bottomless. I started to believe I was doomed, a bad person, absolutely cursed, deserving of everything Jay, my mother, and my dad did to me. I was convinced I was born to be an unlovable, motherless, fatherless child. School became a haze. I failed most classes. Instead of learning, I retreated into drawing and writing. Because of this, I was forced into counseling, but I wasn't allowed to talk about what was really happening. Instead, I spun wild stories to my counselor, telling her about a ghost haunting my house, hurting me, terrifying me, hoping she'd pick up on the metaphor, that she'd realize something was wrong and investigate. She didn't. She simply decided I was a strange, difficult kid and eventually stopped seeing me. One moment stands out like a bruise. In history class, we started to learn about slave torture and atrocities. The details overwhelmed me, hit too close to home. I remember breaking down, unable to breathe, sobbing uncontrollably. My history teacher called home about my outburst. Jay found out and sat me at the kitchen table with the history book, making me read and reread the section aloud, over and over. When I pleaded, "These poor people, please don't make me do this anymore," he coldly replied, "No. Not these poor people. Read it again." I was kept up until 2 a.m., forced to read until I was numb to the pain in those pages. Jay worked tirelessly to implant bigotry in me, insisting that people of color, especially black people, were thieves, liars, abusers, and not to be trusted. I never understood this, even as a kid. It made even less sense because Jay had a close black friend, and his daughter was my best friend. So why was he trying to poison me with racism? I've never figured it out, though I suspect now that his mind was as warped as his cruelty was boundless.
When my mom finally packed up her things and left Jay, I was 13 years old.
That moment is still the happiest memory from my childhood. Suddenly, there were no cameras in my room. No one was laying their hands on me. For the first time, I felt free. It didn't last long though. Jay managed to worm his way back into my mom's life, despite her promise to me that he never would. I can still see that sinister look on his face as he carried his bags back into our home. He looked right at me, triumphant, like he had won. We ended up moving back into his house, which felt like being thrown back into a prison cell. The rage inside me boiled hotter than ever, and my rebellion began in earnest. My friends at school started to ask why I was never allowed to hang out outside of school, or why they couldn't come over to my house. I said I would ask about it, and I did, but Jay simply told me no. Defiantly, I did the one thing he hated most. I asked him, why not? I showed up to school the next day, with a busted bottom lip. When my friend asked what happened, I told her the truth. Jay had beaten me. She was stunned, asking why a parent would do something like that. I explained that it was because I dared to ask him a question, and he didn't like that. She told her mom, who immediately called CPS. I don't remember talking to anyone from CPS, or even seeing them come over. My mom ordered me to stay in my room, silent, and I did just that until she told me it was safe to come out. Later, I found out that my mom and Jay had been telling child services, my teachers, my friends' parents, and all my counselors that I was too mentally handicapped to think for myself, that I was a pathological liar with a wild imagination, and not to believe a word I said. They used my ADHD and autism diagnoses as proof, keeping me small, uneducated, and brainwashed just so they could cover their tracks, leaving me, the victim, voiceless, with no reputation to defend myself. After all, who would believe a mentally handicapped pathological liar? When I was 14, Jay approached me at random, frantic and desperate. He told me my mom was planning to leave him again, and said he needed my help to keep our family together. He kept me sitting on the couch, insisting that my mom was sick and I had to call 911 to tell them she was abusing me, so they could take her to a facility to get help. Don't you want us to be a happy family? We can be if you do this. Your mom just needs help, and you can help her. I refused and tried to sleep, but he wouldn't leave me alone. He grabbed me and kept me there for hours, begging, repeating himself all through the night until I saw the sun about to rise. I finally said yes, simply because I needed to go to school and hadn't slept at all. He handed me a phone to use at school and instructed me exactly what to say. So yes, I made the call. I told 911 that my mom was abusing me and needed help. I wanted to tell them about Jay too, but experience had taught me that when I brought him up, no one believed me. I was exhausted, and deep down, I already knew he'd talk his way out of trouble, so I didn't bother wasting my energy. My mom spent 5 months in jail. Jay expected to get custody of me, but I ended up going to my grandma's house instead. My family made sure I understood exactly how they felt about me. They thought I was a terrible person. I tried to tell them everything, about Jay, about my mom, but no one believed me. They were more upset that I had snitched on my mother and ruined her life. When my grandma discovered I was self-harming, she spiraled, put a knife to my arm, and told me to go ahead and do it. Living in her custody made it clear to me exactly why my mom had so many issues herself. As soon as I could, I got out. I have no pleasant memories from my childhood. As I got older, I steadily went no contact with my mom and grandma. I haven't spoken to Jay since I was 18, although he did send me an email when I was 21. I never replied. For the last year and a half, I've been writing everything down. I refuse to let my story gather dust, to remain voiceless forever, And this is only half of what happened to me, but even this feels too long already. Jay left me with permanent scars, mental and physical. I suffer from major depressive disorder, severe anxiety, OCD, and CPTSD. I'll have to take medication and go to therapy for the rest of my life to try to cope with what he did to me. Meanwhile, he's out there, living his best life, running a successful business, raising his own family of boys, thriving, only because the statute of limitations for child abuse is passed. There's nothing more I can do. Justice will never be mine. All I can do now is live the life I was meant to, keep taking my meds, keep showing up for therapy, hoping one day things will change. I hope our justice system wakes up, because so many victims like me will never see justice, simply because a certain amount of time has passed. But what about kids, brainwashed or suffering from Stockholm Syndrome? Do they matter? No one seems to think so. 2 weeks ago, my phone lit up with an unknown number while I was standing in my kitchen rinsing coffee, grounds out of a French press. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, some old, feral radar, made me swipe green. A calm voice said my first and last name like he was trying not to startle me. Then, I'm a detective with City, PD. I'm calling about Jay. I went in the next day. The interview room smelled like paper and old carpet, the way school libraries used to smell before everything went digital. The detective put a cardboard banker's box on the table, then slid it toward me like he was offering me a choice. Inside were tapes, actual tapes, stacked and labeled in blocky handwriting that wasn't mine. Some were mini DV, some were old camcorder cassettes with little white stickers across their spines. My name wasn't on them. The dates were years that live in my mouth like pennies. Wedged in the corner was a Ziploc bag with scraps of schoolwork stuck together by humidity. The top page was a crumpled spelling test with a sticker I used to collect, a holographic lizard that shimmered green if you tipped it, my name in messy pencil at the top. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. He said a storage unit had gone delinquent, contents auctioned, buyer spooked by what he saw and turned everything straight over. They'd been looking for me quietly for a while, and for once, my last name being uncommon helped. He told me, very carefully, that state charges tied to assaults might be dust, but there are crimes that don't run out of clock the same way. I heard the words exploitation, federal partners, production, and felt like the room tilted a few degrees. I stared at the gray scuff marks along the baseboard while he talked because looking at him would make it too real. He asked if I could look at still frames to confirm the room. I said yes and no at the same time and somehow nodded. He turned the screen away from me, scrolled, then angled it back just enough to show a corner no one else would recognize. The thumbtack hole constellation near the ceiling where I used to stick glow-in-the-dark stars, the long black cord snaking along the wall, the shitty little TV in the living room catching that feed. My body remembered the angle before my mind did. I told him it was my room. He watched my face like a lifeguard watching a swimmer, ready to dive. Then he slid a yellow sticky note and a flip phone across the table. They wanted me to make a pretext call. My hands went slick. I hadn't spoken to Jay in almost a decade. The detective said I was in control, I could hang up if I needed, we could try another day. I kept seeing the hamster cage on the kitchen table and his grin. I picked up the phone. Jay answered on the second ring, all fake warmth, the voice he used on strangers and waiters. Hey, buddy. I almost hung up from pure nausea. Instead, my mouth did something it learned to do to survive. I matched his tone, let him think I was small again. I asked him if he ever thought about back then. If he remembered why the camera was in my room. He went quiet for a second. The sound of him thinking has a weight to it I can identify by vibration alone. Then he said, patient like a teacher, we had to. You know why? After what you were doing. Your mother and I agreed. The detective's pen stopped mid-scratch. He gestured for more. I asked him if he kept any of those tapes. He made this soft scoff laugh, like he couldn't believe I was being so dramatic. He said he'd taken care of all that. I felt my throat close and my hands start shaking so hard the phone clicked against my teeth. I told him I had to go. He told me to call him any time, used my name like a leash. After, I went to my car and sat with the engine off until the cold seeped into my jeans and my palms stopped buzzing. The detective came out and stood by the open passenger door, not getting in. He said, you did great, in the way people say I'm sorry at funerals. He said they'd be looping in Homeland Security. He said this could actually go somewhere. That night, another unknown number, another voice from a ghost I thought I'd buried. It was Jay's niece, 11 then, older now than I am in all my memories of her. I didn't recognize her name at first, I recognized the apology in her inhale. She told me she'd been contacted too. That she'd carried what happened like acid in a mason jar, tight-lidded, for years. That he'd told her what to do to me, how to act, what to say, and she had done it because she was a child and he was who he was. She said I'm sorry 3 times, then I can help, once. I sat very still and let both land inside me. The kid part of me wanted to spit. The adult part understood a geometry of harm I hadn't let myself map. I told her I heard her. That's all. After we hung up, I lay on the floor and stared at the ceiling until my eyes made shapes out of the plaster. The next week stretched like gum. Every time my phone buzzed, my body braced. Work was just moving my hands through tasks and checking clocks. Then, yesterday morning, The detective called again. I was in my kitchen, again, always there, apparently, like the room is some kind of witness. He didn't draw it out. He said, "We executed the warrant. He's in custody. Federal charges. The kids are with their mom's sister for now." He said he couldn't say more. He didn't need to. I slid down the cabinet, again, but this time what came out of me wasn't the old animal panic. It was something lighter and uglier at once, like laughing and sobbing had a baby. My neighbors probably heard it. I didn't care. I drove by his business after dark like I was scaring myself on purpose. The lights were off. A closed sign swung in a slow arc. There was a piece of paper taped inside the glass door, official-looking font, a seal I couldn't see clearly. I sat in the parking lot and watched my breath fog the windshield and disappear. I don't know what I expected to feel. Triumph never showed up. Relief did, in pieces. So did the kind of grief you don't have a word for, the one that shows up when the monster steps out into the porch light and you realize he was always a man. This doesn't rewind time. It doesn't give 11-year-old me a different birthday or a different house. It doesn't make my mother the mother I needed. It doesn't cure the way my nervous system fires at shadows or make mornings easier. But a door that was bolted shut and my head swung on its hinges yesterday. The thing I've been told 100 times I'd never get, movement, happened. A box nobody was supposed to find was found. A sentence I thought would never be spoken was said in a room with tape recorders running and pens moving. This isn't justice yet. Court is a slog, I'm told. There will be hearings and continuances and language that drains all the blood and heat out of what he did. I will have to sit on a wooden bench and breathe through other people saying my name like a case number. Right now, though, in this small slice of time, I'm holding something I've never had before. Not hope. I've had cheap versions of hope before and they broke in my hands. This is steadier. It feels like being believed by a system that has always looked past me. It feels like the ghost moving out. Yesterday a white envelope slid under my door like a quiet animal. No return address, just my name typed in a font that looks like it wears a tie. Subpoena. Grand jury. The date was circled in blue pen by someone's steady hand. I read it twice standing barefoot in the hallway, keys still in my mouth from unlocking the deadbolt. The federal building downtown is colder than outside air, like the vents are set to preserve. I put my belt and my watch in a gray bin and tried not to make eye contact with my reflection in the plexiglass. A victim/witness lady with a soft, square scarf gave me a peppermint and sat with me in a room painted the color of unripe bananas. The USO was younger than I expected and older than his face. There's a way people look when they spend their days translating human wreckage into elements of an offense. He told me what would happen. No judge in the room, just jurors, a court reporter, him. He said I didn't have to look at anything I didn't want to. We practiced saying my full name out loud so I wouldn't trip over it. Inside, the air had that old library smell again. The jurors watched me the way lifeguards watch a pool, alert, not unkind. The questions were specific in ways that made my stomach pull tight. Was that corner my room? Did that cord run where he thought it did? Was the voice on the recording mine and was the other voice the one I'd known since I was 6? I looked at the printout of a still frame, not at the screen. The dot pattern above the window, the patch of paint that never quite matched. My body said yes before my mouth did. I answered. The court reporter's machine clicked like insect feet. 18 minutes, maybe 20. When it was over I stood in the hallway with my forehead against the cool metal of a water fountain and let the temperature bleed me back into a shape. 2 days later was detention. I sat on a wooden bench with a bolt head digging into the back of my thigh and held one of those flimsy paper cups that turn warm in your hand. He walked in wearing the color that drains people to one flattened shade. He looked smaller. Not old, not frail, just less myth. He scanned the room like he was counting exits. When his eyes hit me, they skittered off to the clock. The prosecutor spoke in the kind of slow that's meant to be unarguable. Words like minor victims, digital media, coercion, pattern, obstruction risk. The defense tried on a neighbor's smile voice and said husband, business owner, community ties. The judge asked exactly 2 questions and then said the sentence I didn't know I'd been waiting to hear, detained pending trial. The sound of his handcuffs when he stood was smaller than I imagined it would be. He didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, leaning against the stone like she needed it to keep her upright, was my mother. A cigarette cupped in her palm, the lighter clicking without catching the flame. Her hair was pulled back the way she used to do it to clean, tendons showing at her temples. She said my name like she was trying it on to see if it still fit. Then she said he wasn't who they said he was and also maybe he was and also how could I do this and also hadn't we all suffered enough. Her mouth kept moving, words bumping each other, prayers and threats mixing like oil and water. I handed her the detective's card. If you've got truth, give it to someone who can put it somewhere it counts. I walked away before the lighter finally worked. That night there was a knock that wasn't a knock, 3 soft taps like etiquette. An envelope under the doormat. No return, the same office font on the front. Inside was a 2-page letter written in careful schoolteacher print, but it wasn't from a teacher. He wrote my childhood nickname like a hook at the top. The paragraphs were full of fog. We remember differently, families are complicated, your mind has always been delicate, you know I loved you, how cruel that they are doing this to us. I didn't read the second page. I put the whole thing in a Ziploc and texted the detective a photo. "Don't touch it more than you have to," he wrote back. "Thank you." The next afternoon the USA smiled with only the corners of his eyes and said the word tampering like he was laying down another brick. The niece called again, this time from a number with a state I don't have a postcard of. We met at a diner off the highway where the pie display case spins like a slow galaxy. She's got her father's jaw, her mother's eyes, and a way of folding her napkin into smaller and smaller squares when she's talking about something that could swallow a room. She slid a photo across the table, Polaroid, the color's gone weird. 2 kids on a mattress on a floor, a sticker of a holographic lizard glittering on the corner of a spelling test taped to the wall. On the back, in a handwriting I can spot at 20 paces, "My good kids." She told me about riding in his truck to a warehouse district in a different county when she was 13, how he'd made her carry a shoebox into a unit that didn't look like his used one, cleaner, emptier, a blue tarp hung like a curtain. She remembered the number because it matched something dumb and easy, 69, teen brain logic. I texted it to the detective with no commentary. He sent back only, "On it." This morning they called before it even made coffee. The unit existed. Rented under a business name he'd filed that never actually did any business. The search turned up what they politely refer to as devices and what my mind refuses to picture. There was also a binder with receipts, dates like teeth, and a pink plastic envelope of kid junk that wasn't mine or hers. "We're identifying," the agent said, his voice going flat for the parts that needed flatness. I sat down on the floor because my knees were doing that disappearing trick. The peppermint the witness lady gave me 2 days ago had melted to a stuck-together bow in the pocket of my jacket. I unwrapped it anyway. It tasted like hospitals and Christmas. Later, the victim/witness woman called me back just to say she had something for me. "Personal property," she said, and her voice held it like it might break. I went down there and she handed me a clear bag with a few stray pages they didn't need for evidence. On top, my old spelling test with the holographic lizard. I ran my finger over it and the green changed to gold, the way it used to. There's an agent with DHS now who calls me by my last name and nothing else. He talks fast, like he's always on his way to the next thing, but he asked me twice if I had a safe place to be tonight. There's a safety plan taped inside my kitchen cabinet next to the list of pantry staples. A marshal explained the difference between moving in silence and disappearing, and how we were doing the first one. He was kind without being soft. I slept in a hotel one night because they worried about someone from the outer rings of Jay's life trying something stupid. The ice machine down the hall clunked like a slow heartbeat until 2 a.m. I put the do not disturb tag on the wrong side of the door twice. They added counts. That's how the USA put it over the phone, superseding indictment. Production, transportation, possession, tampering. The words are cold but they build a little wall I can stand behind for a second at a time. He told me I won't have to watch anything in court if I don't want to, that there are ways to shield without hiding. He said we a lot, and I didn't correct him. I drove past the house I grew up in because I have bad ideas sometimes. The paint is a new color now. Someone put a bird feeder in the front yard. There are plastic toys tucked under the porch, unrelated kids living ordinary lives. I sat in my car and watched the feeder swing and thought about the thumbtack constellation near a ceiling I can't see anymore, about cords and screens and how much of a life can follow you if you don't cut it loose. I didn't get out. I didn't need to. The ghost doesn't live there either. On my fridge now, held up by a magnet shaped like a cartoon strawberry, is a photocopy of the docket sheet. Names and numbers, dates marching in columns. It's ugly and bureaucratic and I love it. Every line is a door being kept open by something heavier than me. The hamster lives only in the part of my brain where 11 is forever, but in the other parts of my life, adults with badges and legal pads are speaking sentences that turn into action. I go to work. I come home. My phone buzzes and the message is not doom but logistics. I peel the backing off the old lizard sticker and press it to the inside of my wallet, where it can look up and change colors when the light hits it. He is where he belongs right now. I am where I am. Between those two facts, something steady has started. Not spring, exactly. More like the first time the heat clicks on in a place you pay rent for and you realize the air can be warmed by flipping a switch you control. I keep breathing. The system, for once, keeps answering back. The ghost is packing boxes. Court smells like someone scrubbed something bad and didn't quite get it all. The USA texted me the night before with the time and the 2 words that make my bones want to hide: suppression hearing. I went anyway. Fluorescents hummed like bees. The defense had a PowerPoint no one asked for, photos of the storage unit hallway cropped within an inch of their lives, and phrases like reasonable expectation of privacy blown up in serif font. They said auction like a magic word that should make the tapes vanish. The prosecutor didn't raise his voice. He said private actor in scope and slid the warrant across like it was a coaster, signed, dated, specific. The judge asked a question about the lock being cut and the buyer's access, then another about whether the second unit, the blue tarp one, was tied to a business filing. The agent at counsel table never stopped looking at his hands. When it was done, the judge said it in a way that made it feel less like a victory than a decision gravity had already made. Motion denied. Jay's shoulders didn't slump. He just stopped pretending they were square. After, The USA asked if I was up for one thing they wanted to use at a bond review that wasn't a bond review because there was no bond to review. He meant a slice of a jail call from 2 nights after the letter showed up under my doormat. Legal mail, his lawyer had said, like fiction could be made true by envelope color. The sound played out of a little black speaker that looked like a toy. His voice hit the room and I felt the old geography download in my spine. He was talking to his wife about calming everybody down, telling her to remind him of who we were as a family, and then, in a tone I know like the taste of rust, he tested the phrase fragile mind out loud. The USA didn't look at me. He watched the judge. That, he said, tapping his pen once against his pad, is why tampering's in the superseder. The judge didn't nod. He just wrote and said, noted. The woman from victim/witness found me in the hallway after with a paper cup that tasted like dust and peppermint. Do you want to see your designation? She asked, holding it like it might sting. I said yes, because the part of me that likes to press on bruises is thorough. Black letters on white paper, victim 1. It shouldn't have meant anything. It did. I folded it once, then again, and slid it behind the lizard sticker in my wallet like they were keeping each other company. My mother tried again. Not to cry this time. She came with a plastic grocery bag tucked under her arm like a baby and a look like she'd practiced in the mirror, neutral, helpful, available for absolution. I met her in the lobby because it had cameras and a guard who called everyone ma'am by default. She pulled out a stack of papers with a flourish she must have thought read as cooperative. Manuals. A receipt taped to printer paper for a camera with a model number that made the DHS agent go still when I texted it later. A signed permission slip for a field trip with my name forged in a curl that isn't hers or mine. I'm trying, she said. I'm telling the truth. Her eyes kept sliding off mine like there was oil on them. I gave her the number for a public defender and the name of the US's paralegal. I told her to talk to them and not to me. If you want to live somewhere with less smoke, pick a door and walk through it, I said, surprising both of us. She looked past me to the exit as if the sentence had drawn a map no one had shown her before. They set a date. Trial, in a month that still looks like a foreign country on my calendar. The USA said we're always ready sooner than we say we are, then told me I wouldn't have to sit in a room with him if I didn't want to, that there are screens and routes and little small kindnesses built into a system that isn't known for kindness. He also said the defense floated resolving it. That word sat between us like a glass of water you can't drink. If he pleads, you get a say, he said. Not the last say, but a say. He told me numbers, years that make your brain stutter because it's trying to convert them into seasons, into birthdays, into anything but bricks. I don't know what I'll say yet. I'm practicing not apologizing to empty rooms. The niece and I have a new place we meet that isn't the diner. There's a park by the river where the benches are painted a color someone must have called municipal green at a meeting. We sat with our backs to the water and traded specifics like two people diffusing something neither of us built. She brought me a star. Not mine, one she bought at a dollar store, peeled off the sheet and stuck to the inside of an envelope so it wouldn't get lint on it. I thought maybe you'd want to put new ones up, she said without looking at me. I did that night. I stood on a chair and put a crooked constellation over my bed that means nothing to anyone but me. The glue smell took me right back and then, just as quickly, didn't. I lay there and watched them gather light and give it back slow. There are parts of your brain that will take any chance you give them to make a different picture. An agent with a haircut like the military gave him homework dropped his voice when he told me this part. We're at 3 additional minors we can name so far, he said, words careful stepped. Different counties. 2 states. Their people are with them. I put both hands on the counter so I wouldn't float up. He said there were chat logs the forensics guys pulled off a backup he thought was for invoices, a cloud folder that was a Russian doll for worse and worse. We are knocking on doors, he said. I thought about all those years telling strangers my house was haunted and wishing someone would come in with salt and logic and flick lights on. It turns out the magic words were metadata, search warrant, probable cause. You don't get back the days, but you can pry up floorboards. There was a day in there where I did nothing right. I poured milk into the trash can instead of the sink because my head was somewhere with blue tarps and shoeboxes and the number 69. I put my clean socks in the freezer. I didn't answer my phone even when it was the numbers that now ring like sirens but good. When I came back to the world, there was a voicemail from a man whose name I didn't know but whose job I did. He was the guy who buys abandoned things. He said he'd gotten a subpoena and would be testifying to chain, like he was telling me the weather. We ended up in the same hallway the next week, him with a key ring heavy enough to be a weapon and me with my little lizard wallet. He didn't try to make it a moment. He just said, I got no use for keeping ghosts, and nodded like we agreed on something obvious. The defense tried one more trick I could see coming from the elevator, a motion to preclude unduly prejudicial terminology, which meant not saying the word victim out loud and not calling the tapes what they are. The judge looked at the paper, then at the prosecutor, then at me like he'd forgotten there was a real person attached to any of it and was remembering in real time. We'll call things what they are, he said, not kindly, just correctly. The court reporter's fingers paused for half a second, then kept going. Somewhere in all this, the people with badges came to my apartment and did small work that felt like spells. A different lock. A camera over a hallway that's always smelled like other people's dinners. A walkthrough where the marshal pointed out how a plant on the windowsill blocks sightlines from the street. "We're not asking you to disappear," he said. "We're making it so if someone wants your attention, they have to ring a bell first." I bought a plant that isn't a fern and named it nothing and watered it anyway. I went back to work. I had a day where I didn't think about the thumbtack constellation until noon. At therapy, we followed the cord with our eyes, left to right to left, and when my hands wanted to curl into claws, I let them, then let them not. I stopped at a pet store once and stood in front of a row of small, breathing creatures and didn't go in. I don't have to run every circle to know where it ends. This morning the USA called and didn't bury the lead. "We've got a plea on paper," he said. "It's real." He gave me the number. It sat in the middle of my kitchen like a piece of furniture I hadn't ordered. He said it would mean no trial, no cross, no defense expert saying my brain is a bad historian and a voice meant to sound like science. "It's your call how you feel about that," he said. "Well, listen." I told him I wanted a night to let my nervous system catch up. He laughed a little, not at me. "That's the best sentence I've heard all day," he said. On my table, underneath the docket photocopy and my spare keys, there's a little blister pack torn open, stars missing. The rest of them will go up soon. The bird feeder at the old house will keep swinging without me watching it. In a federal building with carpets that swallow footfalls, someone will say my name and not mean an insult. He will stand up in a room and say guilty, or he won't, and will build another path. Both ways, the road is out from under his feet. When I turn off my kitchen light at night, the ceiling holds a shape I made on purpose. The ghost is down to a forwarding address and no mailbox. The air hums and then it doesn't. I sleep. I wake. The system keeps picking up when I call. The heat stays on.